We started this series called We Are Relevant 2 weeks ago. In week 1, we said we are grateful, and we talked about gratitude leading to generosity, and we thought, thank God for the last 12 years and look forward to the next 12 years. Last week, we said we are people helping people. I'll talk about that in a moment. And we just talked about how we as a church are a community of people helping one another. And then this week, I just want to title today's message, We Are Plan A. See, when the church fails, all the other systems try to pick up the pieces, and it's not God's plan. We are plan A. The church is God's plan of redemption in this culture and in this community to take the gospel of Jesus to the world. Next week, y'all get ready because we're doing a message called We Are Never Finished. Because I think the next 12 years are going to be all gas, no brake. Come on, somebody. And we're going after it. And so I'm excited. So here's what I want you to do. We're going to review this mission statement. We say this is why we exist as a church. We are a community of people helping people live out their purpose in Jesus Christ. A community of people helping people live out their purpose in Jesus Christ. Now, the focus of this month has really been on the next generation. And today we're going to continue that conversation about people helping people and really talk about people helping children. Families helping children is what we're going to talk about today. Galatians chapter 6 verse 9 says, let us not become weary in what? In doing good. For at the proper time, not our timing, God's timing, we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. That means it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be some times we want to quit. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. And here's what I want you to know and hear from me today. We have an incredible opportunity to do good that I want to talk to you about. We talked about last week an opportunity that God has blessed us with, and as Gigi's house became an official part of Relevant Church, we're talking about foster care this morning and orphan care this morning. Next week, I'm going to talk about another organization in our community that we love dearly and we partner with. But here's what I need you to hear. Last week, this week, and next week, I need you to hear something. There is one area that I believe is as close to God's heart as any other area in our lives as believers, and that is this: caring for children without families. If you want to touch the heart of God, you do it for the least of these. And if we're going to be able to be people helping people, then we cannot neglect this area of our church and of our own personal lives. All of us have a responsibility in the culture in which we live, in the crisis in which we face. And if we are going to be obedient to God's call on Relevant Church and on our own personal lives, this must be the center of our mission. We have to love those who don't have families or who are separated from their families for whatever reason, who are searching for connection in families. And so Psalm chapter 68 says it this way: a father, talking about God, to the fatherless, a defender of widows is God in his holy dwelling. And I love this. God sets the lonely in families. God's design since the creation of the world. He creates Adam. He said, it is not good for man to be alone. And every man said, some of y'all just got nudged in the side because y'all didn't say it loud enough. I try to give you men opportunities, but y'all don't listen very well. Man, I'm going to give you one more chance. It is not good for man to be alone. So he created woman. Don't say, oh, me. All right, you're in real trouble if you say that. All right. Then he says, be fruitful and multiply. He established the cornerstone of his creation. The foundation of his creation was the family unit. And listen to me. The enemy has been at work trying to destroy the family ever since. Because what he knows is if he wants to destroy a society, to take out the family unit. And so when you hear it politicized and you hear it talked about in other circles, just know anything outside of the context of God's design is the enemy trying to undermine our culture so that we cannot thrive in the things of God. And so then, because we believe in the sanctity of life, we care about all life. We care about unborn children. We care about babies. We care about the pregnant teenage girl. We care about those without families or those that are separated from their families. All life matters to God. We are all created in His image with the Spirit that He gave us, a soul, and at the end of the day, we have to do our part. If we say we care, we have a responsibility to put that care and that love into action. And so then, Psalm chapter 10, verse 14, but you, God, you see the trouble of the afflicted. You consider their grief, you see this, and take it in hand. The victims commit themselves to you. You are the helper to the fatherless. Listen to this language. The afflicted. grief, victims. Who are they? The fatherless. And so we live in a broken world with broken families. And it is creating a lot of victims. I don't mean victim mentalities. That's a whole other conversation. I mean children, wives, teenagers, kids left going, what's next for me? And so here's what I want you to write down, and here's what's going to be our springboard into I'm going to teach for about 15 minutes, and we're going to have a conversation. We will embrace orphans because the church is plan A, not the government. Some of y'all got happy. I am grateful. I'm grateful for those people who've dedicated their lives, even in the public service sector, to help care for orphans. But it is the church's job. If the church did their job, we wouldn't need a governmental system. So, for those of you who serve in that system, thank you for helping pick up our slack. But as a church in America, it is our job to step up. The church is God's plan A, to care for the fatherless, to care for orphans, to care for widows. And the family unit is still God's design. And so the families have been destroyed. The church has to be a model of what a spiritual family looks like and what healthy physical families look like. And so he says God sets the lonely in families. Church families? How many of you are grateful that you found a church family? You're not out there trying to do it on your own. You know what I'm saying? Like, can you imagine what it would be like to serve Jesus without other people? Without people challenging. So he sets the lonely in spiritual families. He also sets the lonely in physical families. God's heart is that every child would have a family. James, the brother of Jesus, said it this way. This is so good. I love these words. And if you look, if you just want to know how Jesus might have felt, you might want to talk to somebody close to Jesus, right? And he says, religion that God, the Father, accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their what? Distress. And to keep oneself from becoming polluted by the world. Do you know, if you just dig into this passage, do you know one of the greatest things that I think, if we'll just do what this passage says, we'll be less distracted by what the enemy says. Polluted by the world because we're focused on things of the world. You want to focus on God's heart? You'll be more full of God's joy and God's love and God's peace and God's generosity, all those things. So people don't just need a physical family, they need a spiritual family. Everybody needs a physical and a spiritual family. And so, hear me, we can't do everything as a church, but we can do something. And here's what God is doing. As we step out and start to do something, God is opening another door and another door and another door. And here's what I'm telling you. God has put us right in the center of this crisis in our community as the church, as the flagship church, saying we're not going to back down until we impact this culture. And so, we say our job from birth until they get through young adult years, because young adult years ain't easy, are they, young adults? Come on. We say our goal is to raise a generation of children that never know a day without knowing Jesus. You understand, from birth through college, the culture we live in is constantly trying to undermine and retrain their minds to think like culture. We get 1 hour a week with these kids on campus. We got to do more. We got to get our hearts right, our minds right, our theology right, because we take these kids home with us, right? And then we got to love these kids, important these kids. We got to partner with you as parents to help your children live out their purpose. And so I have a 15-year-old. He hates when I tell stories, but I can still take him, so it's good. True story, because he was a little guy, and we all did things like this when we were a little guy. But when he was little, his mom and I have been wrestling with what is our best contribution to foster care and adoption, respite care, vision casting, training, whatever it is when it comes to this realm for years. And this is why it's become a heartbeat of our church. We were talking about adoption when he was a little guy, and he started crying. Like, he was not a crier, but I'm talking bawling. And I'm like, bro, I know you're spoiled, but geez, what's the deal? And he looked at his mom and I and said, I don't want to be adopted. He thought we was going to adopt him out. Like, bro, you're 3.5. We can't do this anymore. See you later. And for like 3 minutes, his world was shattered. Now listen, yet kids live days, weeks, months, years, decades with no family. And we don't even notice. If his world was shattered in 3 minutes, imagine the pain, the grief, the distress, the heartache, and what better place to show love and grace than the church? And so here's the theology behind it. We will embrace orphans because we were once spiritual orphans. You see, we were without Jesus. We were without us. It doesn't matter. All other religions are dead. There is one God and one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus, who gave his life as a ransom for you and for me. There's only spiritual family that's going to lead you anywhere is a relationship with God through his son Jesus. And we were wandering around aimlessly in this thing called life, doing our own thing, and God chased us down and adopted us into his family. Listen to what it says in Galatians chapter 4. But when the fullness of time had come, that is God's timing, not ours. It says, the fullness of time, God sent forth his son, born of a woman, born under the law. Because the reason Jesus was born under the law, we had all failed. We all failed miserably at fulfilling all the Old Testament law. So Jesus says, okay, I'll be born in the law. I'll fulfill all that the law commands of you. And I'll be able to be the one to redeem those who are under the law. So that, listen, we might receive what? Adoptions as sons. Like full sonship or daughtership. That word is literally plural in that regard. And it goes on to say, and because you are sons or daughters. Listen to this, I love this. God has sent the Spirit of the Son into our hearts crying, Abba, Father. Now let me pause for a second. Do you know what that means? It literally means Daddy, God. You know, you ever seen those shirts? We got 2 boys and we appreciate the humor in the shirt where it says, like boys, it's a shirt for moms, and it says, they come out and it says, Ma, Mama, Mom, and then bruh. My 10-year-old's about to be 11 and he's like, Mom will say something and he'll be like, bruh. I mean, it's your mom, bro. I'm convinced boys need 2 words in life. That's it, bruh and dude. Dude. Bruh. I'm like, what? He's like, Dad, bruh. Dude, Dad, bruh. They can be playing video games and one's like, dude. He's like, bruh. Dude. Whatever, bruh. Like, you got a whatever in there. And y'all got girls, that is not y'all. It's like, I don't know. Okay, whatever. But like, as they grow up, the names change for parents. Here's what God has all these names. But this is the one he says, the Spirit of Daddy God. Listen to me, if you grew up without a father, you have a Father in heaven that is the perfection of everything you wished your father on earth would have been. And he loves you unconditionally. And he does that so we're no longer a slave, it says, but a son. Listen to this, and if a son or a daughter, then an heir through God. An heir, what does an heir mean? It means that every right that Jesus has that is God's, we now also have as brothers and sisters in Christ. Sons and daughters of God. That is our spiritual family. We had nothing, now we have everything that eternity promises. Therefore, if we were spiritual orphans adopted by a spiritual God, how much more should we embrace orphans in a physical realm? It may be more like God to bring children into our family than anything else. Because I was adopted into God's family. You were adopted into God's family. Ephesians says it this way, God decided when? In advance to adopt us into his own family by bringing us to himself through Jesus Christ. That is why, he goes on to say, he wanted to do it. Not he felt obligated. He wanted to do it. And it gave him great pleasure. Notice God didn't just have intentions, he actually did it. There's a lot of people say, I was planning on that. Do you know there's a graveyard of good intentions, right? People die their whole life and never fulfilled it. I thank God that he didn't just have intentions toward us. He actually loved us and expressed that love toward us through his generosity of his son. And so we're going to embrace, and he says he wanted to do it, and it brought him great joy. If we're going to embrace children without families, with hurts and pains from what all that entails, the distress, then then, and we're going to tackle the crisis in this community, I'm going to give you two promises that it's going to take from us, okay? I promise you this. Number one, it won't be easy. The crisis is huge. Because dads, lean in dads, we got to do better. Men in our country need to step up and be men. And lead and love and lay down their life for their families. But it's not. It's a selfish culture we live in. I thank God for the men who got baptized today and took their next step, the men who serve and give and attend this. You could be a lot of places today on a Sunday morning, but you're in church. Give yourselves a hand. Come on. But now we got to tackle all the other brokenness out there that people have let them. And listen, maybe you're one of those people. There's still hope. There's grace for you, but we got to step it up. Here's the second one. The child is worth it. It's worth it. You may want to write this down. This phrase will change your perspective. Investing in the life of one child won't change the world. But for that one child, it will change his or her world. And that's really what it's about, isn't it? And so about 25 years ago, I was in college and met a young man, young adult by the name of Eric Porter, who's here with us today. Eric and I were roommates my freshman year of college. And so there seemingly is, that's interesting. That's never happened. Come on in. Guess I offended somebody. So at the end of the day, we were roommates for the first year of college, and Eric and Trish are with us today, but before I introduce them, we went our separate ways out of college and both served in ministry. And first of all, a lot of people I went to college with aren't in ministry today, and so 25 years of ministry is worth celebrating God for. And they're here, yeah. And so they started an organization called Backyard Orphans. And I want you to hear from them in a moment, but the premise behind Backyard Orphans is we fly to countries all over the world to care for orphans there, and we fly right over orphans in our own backyard. And so I've asked Eric and Trish, would you guys join me on the stage? Would you give them a big round of applause? I've been told to scoot the things closer together from the online group. So these guys are with us. They've been training some of our team, caring for some of our team, building relationships with organizations in the community. And so this is your family. So tell us a little bit about your family and how you got into foster and orphan care.
I feel like we should do some stories from college, don't you guys think?
Nope, there's no time for that.
No time for that? Oh, man,
Our
good
first
times.
date, though,
That's true.
our first date was with Carl and Julie.
Yeah.
So
They were like an old couple. They'd been together since high school. And it was our
So
first
it's like
date.
13, right? Or 12?
No, not that young. No.
Well, I also met this cute girl at the same time. In 97, it was fall 97.
Yep.
I met both of you guys. And she said yes. Woo! You know? And
We hope so.
Yeah. And there's 4 biological kids up there and 2 adopted. I'll let you figure out which ones are which there. So.
And so tell us a little bit about how you came into foster care, like your heart and your passion for orphans specifically, those with the fatherless in our community. You served on staff at a large church in Missouri for a while.
Yeah, we were local pastors for 12 years, and it was a larger church, and that just means we made more phone calls to the child abuse hotline than maybe other pastors did, of kids from our community who were seeking hope and healing at our church. Mm-hmm. And one of my first phone calls was a girl who was being beaten by her father with a cane because she didn't make straight A's. I started finding out all these other stories of kids put in dryers for punishment or whipped with electric cables for punishment or a newborn baby left for dead in a dumpster. I held a newborn child who was almost starved to the point that he almost died. His eyes were sunken in and his little joints swollen. And that's when God told me what you said, that we are flying over kids to reach kids. There's kids in our own backyard that feel orphaned and need the church. And it didn't make sense to me as a pastor. I was like, why is it my job stops at the phone call to the child abuse hotline?
It's good.
Seems like my job should start as the church. And I got angry. I got angry at this dad who was doing things he shouldn't be doing. I got angry at us as the church and going, what? Why all these years in Bible college and all these years in ministry and nobody ever talked about 400,000 kids in U.S. foster care, 100,000 ready for adoption? And God goes, don't worry, I got you. And I'm like, okay. He said there's 350,000 churches in the U.S. So if every church found a family or two, there'd be a day, which is the vision of our ministry, a day where there's more families waiting on children than children waiting on families.
That's good. So you guys have studied the system for a long time, and not just the statistics, I should say, and how kids are placed, why they're kind of either removed from a home or separated from their families. Tell us who are the children that are in state custody and how they got there, generally speaking.
Yeah, it's those stories I just told you guys. It's kids that didn't sign up for their pain, kids that didn't sign up for their hurt, and oftentimes, guys, it's generational pain. Right? The church hasn't stepped in and intervened, way upstream, and we need to help the biological families as too, because I think sometimes, when you're holding that little guy, and that story I was telling you, between me and that baptism tank was the mom and dad. It was a parent visit, right? Man, that did something to me, guys. Like, it fired me up, and I was like, there are things that I've never thought of since, I haven't thought of since BC. Before Christ in my life. You know what I'm saying? That I wanted to do that, mom and dad. And then God said, you know what? That mom and dad needs Jesus just as much as the child in your arms does, right? And there's all these people involved in the stories of these kids, guys. There's the biological families that need the church. There's child welfare, and you were saying it, man, they're heroes. Like we can demonize them. But listen, every child welfare worker that doesn't do their job right, I can find you a Christian that doesn't do their job.
Come on.
For every child welfare, I got more. Hold on, I got more coming. For every child welfare worker that hits the local news for doing something they shouldn't, I could find you a pastor to hit the local news for doing something they shouldn't. Jesus said, he who's without sin cast the first stone. Now you can clap, right? We got to work with our government friends, guys. They're legal guardians and they're safety and protection, but they're not family.
That's good.
The church is family, right? So you got child welfare agencies that are involved. We don't license agencies. Faith Bridge, the agency here. Well, we just work with your church staff and try to help more churches get involved around the nation. So.
Yeah, you guys just stepped into a training for Faith Bridge. There's a training going on between services and then one right after the service. Maybe you plan lunch, you can cancel it. But it's basically families who are interested in foster and respite care. We talk a little bit more about that, but 45 minutes to see if you're interested really and to learn a little more. It's a prerequisite for actually going through the full training of what that means. But with that conversation, I mean, the room was full from what I understand. You guys are just slammed and overwhelmed from first service, which does not let you off the hook in second. But tell us, there's when I say, is it hard to be a foster family or an adoptive family? There's a process that's kind of hard to go through and all that, but then also talk about on the flip side of the process, how hard has it been? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, it's definitely hard. We're not
Next
going to try to
question.
sugarcoat that. It's hard because you are willingly stepping into a messy situation, but you're bringing hope and God's redemption in there and healing. God is using you as part of a healing process in this child, and so it's an honor and it is rewarding, but it's also really, really hard. I mean, how many of you are just parents in this room? Anybody
Yes.
parents? Keep your hands raised if it's hard to parent, right? So other people just started raising their hands. You didn't raise your hand at first. They're like, oh yeah, but so caring for a child that's not your flesh and blood, and you feel like you have this option to give them back, it can be really hard. And so the enemy is always right there because, like you had just preached earlier, he's there to destroy families. But God is going to use you as part of a healing process. And remembering that in fostering, they aren't yours. And the goal is that the parents would be able to get reconciled back to their kids. And so that's ultimately what we want. Sometimes that's not going to happen. And so then there might be a choice if you can adopt them or not.
So I think with that, talking about being hard, I think let's just push on the American mindset. I love America. I would live here if I had, obviously I do live here, so that's a choice, right? Because if you're American and you're if you make above the poverty line in America, the top 4% of the richest people in the world, so you can move anywhere you wanted if you make above the poverty line, generally speaking. We choose to live here. I love this country. What I do not love is the mindset of this country. And so we have this entitled mindset because generosity leads to entitlement. Think about it. Give your kids too much and watch them become entitled. So generosity leads to entitlement. And what's happened is God has blessed this country for whatever reason he's chosen to for various things, but he's blessed this country, and now we've become a very entitled country. And so part of taking a child into your home is taking any child into your home, not just a 8-week-old brand new baby who I've been waiting on for 4 years, but there's all these other kids that are teenagers or sibling groups, 3, 4, 5, 12 kids that come from families that need care. So talk to us about the importance of taking children, whatever age they are, and also keeping sibling groups together.
Well, I just have one sister in my biological family, and if I was removed from my sister growing up, I would move heaven and earth to get next to my sister, wherever that was. So I think I say that because that's a good perspective for us to think about through the eyes of the child or the youth that's in foster care. Remember God's heart in Corinthians. He even told us that we are ambassadors of reconciliation.
Yeah.
Okay, and reconciliation is like man to man, man to God. It's all this reconciliation. So we want to be ambassadors of reconciliation, helping this child or this youth to get back to their siblings, get back to their biological families, if we can. And so even in our family, we work hard at trying to get the siblings together. It's getting harder as they've all become teenagers and stuff. But we work really deliberately and intentionally to try to get them times. Now, we're protective of how much access we give them to the biological family because they're not all safe. Or not all trusted, but we want them to have some access to it. So, and in the system, guys, everybody wants babies, right? It's like, man, I'd love to have a brand new baby. Well, first of all, you need to understand trauma starts in the womb. So that baby's still going to have trauma to work through, all right? And in the system, it's not babies. You'll be waiting a long time. It's toddlers to teenagers and sibling groups. And so we got to be open to opening our homes to the older ages and to the sibling groups. So.
Yep. And so when you think about that, there's parents in this room. Some people don't have kids living at home, but others do. And they say, well, I got a 5-year-old, or I got a 10-year-old, or I got a baby, or I got a 15-year-old. And I know that's going to affect my kids. And the answer to that question is, you're right, it will. But talk about as a mom, Trish, I think is the best way to maybe explain this, but like how have you seen it affect your kids, and what have your kids, both positive and negative? But I mean, you shared some things first service that I thought were very enlightening about compassion especially.
One thing to remember is that all children that enter the foster care system, none of them are there for a good reason, right? So all of them are coming from a place of trauma. And trauma is like Clorox on the brain. And so the way they respond to different situations, they're not thinking, and let me get scientific on, and I'm not a science person, but they're not thinking from the frontal lobe, which is logical. Yeah. They're thinking from back here, which is fight, flight, or freeze. Their survival mindset, okay? And so a lot of their actions behaviors can just be, we're rewiring, we're trying to help them, right? So with my own bio kids, they see this, they're not blind to it, and they could get frustrated. But what I've seen in my own children is that their capacity for patience has grown. Their capacity for compassion has grown. Because we'll have honest conversations. There was one time my son Isaac, who's 17 now, he was like, if I ever did that, you would never let me get away with it, right? And I said, well, let me ask you a question. Have you ever thought that I was going to get rid of you? Have you ever thought that I don't love you? Wow. And he's like, no. I'm like, it's never crossed your mind. But I bet you every day, that's good. Robert is thinking, today's the day she's going to get rid of me. Because we were his 11th placement. So trust, he doesn't understand trust. Attachment, I don't understand attachment, right? And the other thing is that it works out entitlement. Our kids think that they all deserve their own room, and they all deserve their own toys, and they all deserve Chick-fil-A every day or whatever it is, right? And you start making sacrifices, but those are not bad things for your kids. They need to know they're not the center of the universe.
That's good.
Jesus is the center of it all,
good.
right? Our world does not revolve around our children.
good.
We love our children. I'm dying right now to not be with my children because there's a situation going on, and I'm like, I want to be with my kids so bad right now. But God is with them, and they know that. And our kids, all of our kids, learning to live with one another, it has surfaced the ugly.
That's good.
It's surfaced in my own heart, the ugly. And it's part of that sanctification process that God works through our own selfishness. And so the things 4 years ago that really bothered us now just kind of bother us. You know, you start to grow in capacity for what you can handle. God does give us more than we can handle.
That's good.
But not more than we can handle with him.
That's good.
Okay? So it'll bring you closer to Jesus. It's brought my kids closer to Jesus and us together closer.
We're going to do a series next year called Stupid Things Christians Stay. And one of the stupid, jacked up theological things is God doesn't give you more than you can handle. And if that's the case, then why do we need God? I mean, Jesus in the garden said, my God, why have you forsaken me? And he sweat like drops of blood so we could be adopted into a spiritual family. And so I just hearing that and the compassion, I know with the areas and arenas that our kids are involved in, I see the compassion in their hearts, man. And something that I maybe can't break, but God could use a situation to break. And so with that, state of Georgia, you guys do research all over the country. These guys are going to be in Honduras about 3 weeks before we are. They're leaving next week or tomorrow. So they're leaving for Honduras about an hour from where we're going to be sending our team in November because there's an orphan crisis in Honduras, and they're doing training and all down there. But just talk to us about Georgia for a second. What are the biggest needs in Georgia foster care, and how can we kind of tackle, or what are some things we need to be aware of?
Families. They need more families. Kids are sleeping overnight in child welfare offices. They're staying in hotel rooms because there's not enough families to take in these kids. It's about 10,000 kids in care, 10,000 churches. It's problem solvable. In fact, you guys only have 350 kids ready for adoption right now. That's it. Texas, 4,000. You guys have 350. 350 kids.
We can solve that problem right now with this church today. Just kidding.
Who need a forever family. Guys, and so here's the thing you understand. I'm not saying every adult in here is called to foster adopt. So everybody just take a deep breath, okay? Everybody's called to do something. Listen, we've been in ministry, as we said, 20, 25 years, whatever. And we probably all three of us would agree that we come to a place to realize not every adult should reproduce.
That's good. Come on,
Okay,
somebody.
right? So we got more applause here than most churches. Therefore, not every adult is supposed to be a foster adopt parent, but everybody throughout Scripture. Do you understand our posture? We're not social workers. We're ministers of the gospel.
That's good.
It's not a social movement. It's a gospel movement. This is a mandate through the Word of God to care for orphans and widows. So if it's a mandate, then we got to find our something. Everybody in here has to find your something.
That's good.
So it's either foster adopt or it's support. It's one of those three things right there. And the team here has been doing a great job of building a support system because they need families, number one. Number two, those families need to stay around for a while. They quit. 50% of families quit after the first year of fostering. It's like, well, why? Because they don't have a support system.
That's good.
Your church behind the scene for years has been building a support system, prayer team. Renee's leading the charge there of a prayer team, meals team, resource team, whatever. All these different support things to wrap around the families who are interested in fostering, adopting. And I'm saying the word interested on purpose, okay? So he talked about that meeting right after service for those interested. It's not like if you come to that meeting and go into the room, there's going to be a bunch of kids that pop out of the door and you have to take them home today, okay? It's not how it works. We're just saying if you're interested, take a blind step of faith. Take a step of faith, guys. These kids didn't sign up for their problems, but we need to sign up to help them. And we just need to walk in and figure out, God, what is my something? What is my something?
Yeah, and so when you hear the meeting today is specifically geared toward foster and respite care. We had a sign-up sheet a couple months ago and built teams out of that. And many of you signed up. Many of you signed up and you quit already. So there's a chance for you to get back involved. I hope you'll hear the heart. God didn't call you to put your name on a piece of paper. He called you to serve. And so hopefully we can surround these families because it's going to I think it's going to change our community if we'll get around this. But here's the reality. respite care is a question. Like, what is respite care? So those families that do foster need support, not just with, resources and training and meals and whatever. Respite care is, you go through a similar training that allows you to also keep children for families who have foster children. So you can bring them into your home. Your kids are with people back in Texas now who've been through trainings. And so that's how you can come alongside and give either date nights, or if there's a job or they got to travel or whatever. So there's a lot of little things like that you can come alongside. It's amazing what you can do if you took a kid or a group of kids for, a weekend a month or a Saturday a month or whatever may come of that. So you can learn more about that in that training. And I think maybe the final question before you tell us the story is this. I think probably the most frustrating thing that I hear is a selfish comment. I don't even think people understand the level of selfishness when they say it. And I know the heart's not this. It's just that it's a full lack of understanding, and I think it's Americanized mindset. People will say, good people I love and think they love Jesus with their whole heart. It's a mindset. Will say, I don't think I could do this because I don't think I could let the kids go back because it'll hurt too bad. Speak to that from your perspective.
I don't think I could do it because I couldn't let my kid go back. That sentence is all about me.
It's good.
It's not about what's best for the child. And whether you have a foster child for 2 months, a year, or 3 years, you have an impact in their life that is different than what people outside the church can give them. Anybody can give them a home and food and bed, but you're also giving them true love that comes from the Lord. It is gospel-centered. And so even caring for a baby that might not ever remember you, their body never forgets.
That's good.
And that attachment that happens from you loving a baby and them getting that attention, it impacts their entire life. And I have said this comment before we really got into this space, like, I don't know if I could give them back. But here's the reality. Just because I said that doesn't mean now that kid just disappeared and doesn't need a home.
That's good.
Like they've got to go somewhere. So why not a loving environment that would love them so much that it does hurt when they have to leave?
That's good.
And let's be honest. There's sometimes you get a placement that it doesn't hurt at all. They have to, bye, it's been fun. I got to get my Xanax, like whatever. But you are going to get attached, but that's what those kids need.
Right.
They need the loving attachment.
That's good.
And that small, short time period that they might be with you might be the exact time period that they look back on for the rest of their life and say, that was when I saw family.
That's good.
That was when I met Jesus, and I've never forgotten that family. So you just don't know.
That's good.
You just don't know.
We say we're people helping people. That means we're people helping kids. And it says, in due time, you'll reap a harvest. So don't give up. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. Paul tells us that. He tells the church at Galatians that. And so there's a family on the screen behind us. Tell us a little bit about this little guy.
This is Braden. Our kiddos are 2 of 12 biological siblings. When they were moved into the foster care system 10 years ago, there were 9. Actually, there were 8, and then there's 9. Now there's 12, right? Braden was part of that original 8 or 9 right there, and was one of the last of the youngers to get adopted. He was in the system for 10 years. And so he's a sibling, a biological sibling to our Robert and Kelsey. Robert and I were just hanging out next to each other. They had a sibling visit during the pandemic that was a Zoom visit because we couldn't be in person. And so they were all Zooming, and man, that gets crazy. If any of you teachers or all the people that had to put a bunch of kids or youth into a Zoom, whew.
You'll need to mute your screen.
Yeah, mute your screen. Okay, that's what was going on, as you can imagine. So I was just in earshot. And after it was over, Robert looked at me and said, "Where was Braden?" I said, "That's a good question. I don't know. Let me text CASA." CASA is a court-appointed special advocate. These are volunteers around the nation that are the voice of the child. They go into the home to make sure the child's safe, and they report in court on behalf of the child. They're powerful volunteers. Maybe that's your something, okay?
Yeah.
These CASA workers were with our kids for 10 years. So I texted them and said, "Hey, we're curious where Braden was." I said, "Well, the foster adopt placement he was with decided they were supposed to retire." I don't even know what number of home he's been in. It could be close to 20, in 10 years. It's crazy. He even had an adoptive placement where they chose the other brother. The two brothers were together, and they chose to adopt one brother, but not him. And that was a church person, right? So maybe I shouldn't tell that story. Okay, so those stories stick and they hurt, right? Robert knows that. So he's just said, well, he said, so he doesn't have a family right now? I said, no, he's in between families. And I said, okay. And Robert was like, well, Dad, isn't that what you do? Isn't that your job? I'm like, what do you mean, son? And he's like, I mean, don't you help churches like recruit, foster, and adopt families around the nation? Like, surely there's a church that will take Braden in. I said, let's pray about that, and I'll make some phone calls. So we did. We started praying. We started making phone calls, and nothing. And all of a sudden, Zach and Erica kind of spiritually raised their hand in a small church in Oklahoma. And Braden's in Texas, so interstate is challenging. It was very difficult. They were somewhat newlyweds, right? And she prayed, he prayed, and God started bringing it together. And then they did all the hard stuff that they had to do. They had to get licensing, get their home ready. They got him into their home, I think, summer of 2011. 2020, I'm going way back there. 2021, thank you. That's why she's
21, 11.
she's the better
2020 was a
half.
long year, bro.
That was a long year. Yeah, it was, see? 2021. And it took them almost a year, guys, to get all the things and for them to finally, on May 23rd this year, after 3,533 days in foster care, he is in a forever home. They are ministers at a church. It's awesome.
So when I heard Eric tell a story about the Zoom call, there's so many people on the Zoom call that only one person even noticed that he was gone, that he wasn't on that Zoom call that day. It took one sibling asking, where's he at? It took one person raising awareness that something was off. Hear me today, church. That's what today's about. We are raising awareness that something is off and God's heart is broken. And so we must respond. We say it all the time. Ministry's messy, but we're going to run to the fire without the fear of getting burned. And this is one of those times. And so I just want to say thank you for speaking at our church, helping train our church, giving us encouragement. And we've been highlighting nonprofits all month long that we partner with in this community. We got one more next week. And so today, we want to give you guys a $2,500 check toward Backyard Orphans because of the generosity of Relevant Church people. And just say thank you. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep
Thank you,
making
guys. That's awesome.
And so, a couple things, and then we'll pray. We say, what is our role? What is our responsibility? What is my yes? Maybe you're not in a season of life or called to do that at this moment, bring a child into your home. Maybe respite care, maybe being on the support team. But do you know, if we take this seriously, the amount of children that will be coming into our kids and student ministries that need you? What if we had a waiting list to serve in Relevant Kids or Relevant Youth? Like, we have incredible volunteers, heart and soul, people who serve every single week. But we met some of y'all's kids. They're crazy. Like, as we bring these families in, man, we're going to need to love them and walk alongside of them, much like we have some of our special needs families, families with children with special needs. And so that's been having a buddy system, just the things that we need as these children become a part of the spiritual family. What if we had too many volunteers? And I promise we'd find something for you to do. What if every single mom or single dad who was struggling to be the parent they feel like God calls them to be had support from our church? So again, all this ain't happening by tomorrow. It's overwhelming, but what if we got there? What if the young lady with an untimely pregnancy realized, I'm so glad my church cares. Maybe she wasn't in a place where she could care for the child, and she realized that they're willing to help support me and help me find a loving home for my baby. you see how the narrative changes? Do you see where the answer is different than the government tells you the answer is? See, it's been a hot year with Roe v. Wade and the conversations that go along with that. But listen, we are for life. And it's our responsibility to come alongside people and help these children have a forever family. But it's the church's job. What if instead of waiting for a family to love them, we had families waiting for children who need homes? Right now we got kids waiting for families. What if we have families waiting for children? I just believe that if our church will step up, that's what we could do in this community. Church, this is what people helping people looks like. I'm grateful for everybody who serves here on Sunday morning. You should serve in your local church. You should. Just like teenagers, you should help your mom clean the table and your dad clean the dishes when y'all get done eating. It's part of being a family. We serve one another. We serve each other. We serve our community. We serve guests in our home. But I want you serving outside of this place too. I want you impacting people for the cause of Christ. This is more than shaking a hand or saying hello. This is like all in. This is people helping people. And it's going to be hard, but we're not going to stop. Next week, the message is we are relevant, and every week we're filling in that blank. And next week is we are never finished. So we're just getting started. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to stand with me. And I'm going to ask Eric and Trish to stand and just, I think one of the greatest things we can do for them and their kids and their impact is to pray for God's favor. God is expanding their territory. I don't know, maybe, how long, 7 or 8, 10 years ago when you started this? 11 years ago. I don't think you'd ever dreamed to, I know it's been your heart, but I think when you start to see it become a reality, is you start going, okay, God, you kind of got a way of showing off. And so we're going to pray that God would continue to open up doors. And, literally, if that is I couldn't think of a better thing than having our country lead the way in the church in America, lead the way in caring for children without families. And one day everybody goes, man, what happened to the foster system? It's like the church did what the church should have done from the beginning. And that's why it changed. And so I'm asking you right now, would you just stretch forth your hand as a sign of agreement if you're comfortable? Let's just pray for them and pray for God's favor on their kids and their family. And then, of course, backyard orphans. God, we are so grateful for friends that you bring in our life along the way. We never know when our paths cross what that's going to do. And I have friends from my teenage years and college years that I'll never forget. And we're doing ministry today and impacting people's lives for eternity. And we're grateful that we get to partner with you to make a difference. And I just pray for Eric and Trish as they continue to lead the way in this area of the gospel and be the heartbeat of God for this community and this country and even other countries as they have opportunities, God, that you would give them favor, that you would give them strength, that you would help their kids to understand this and carry on their legacy. For all those kids, those that are either biological or adopted, they are still loved the same way. And I pray they grow up with a purpose beyond what they can imagine, and they would live out that purpose. And God, that we would see literally 400,000 kids in our country find homes. Because I know that's your heart, God. Now let your people respond to that call. And I pray you continue to use them to be a mouthpiece for you in Jesus' name. And everybody said, amen. Would you give them a big round of applause as they're seated? Thank you all so much.